as Israel continues to crank on its self-professed seven-front war. Israel is getting deeper and deeper involved in conflict. And now then today, there could be a signature achievement on the Israeli side, from their perspective at any rate, as Yahya Sinwar, the leader of Hamas, has now been confirmed as killed. It's no longer just a rumor. And we have former State Department official Matthew Ho on the show with us today, one of our faves here and one of our fan favorites. Matt, welcome back to the show, first of all.
Hey, thanks, Danny.
Well, listen, this is breaking news, literally just minutes old from what we're seeing, that it has now been confirmed that Sinwar has been killed. And we were talking just before we went on air that you have heard at least some reports of how this happened, and it wasn't the way we might have thought. What do you know?
That's right. According to Al Jazeera, as well as posts on X from sources in the region, both Israeli and Palestinian, it doesn't seem like this was a targeted operation, that they woke up this morning and launched the mission to specifically get Yahya Sinwar, that this was more of a chance encounter. Their troops came into contact with Palestinian resistance fighters, one of whom was Sinwar, and I guess exchanged a gunfire. They went into a house. The house was destroyed. That seems to be the storyline that's emerged. So, it goes back to this point that we've talked about before, that how prescient or how all-knowing or how omniscient the Israeli, by extension, Western intelligence is often very limited. This will be triumphed and this will be celebrated, but it seems as if this was just a chance encounter. So more than a year after October 7th, they got Sinwar, but it seems to be, at least according to reports, both from Israeli and Palestinian sources, it seems at this point they got lucky.
And speaking of lucky or not lucky, any idea at all, any speculation on why he was out? Because we know that Israel uses a lot of facial recognition technology to where they're constantly surveilling people here. It just seems unusual, and one wonders why he would have been out and exposed like that.
The report I saw said that 2 field commanders were killed alongside of him. He may have just been being a good general, being a good leader, and being out there with his commanders, assessing the situation. I mean, we just don't know. We don't know if this was the first time he'd stuck his head above ground in a year, or if he'd been above ground the entire time. You know, I mean, I always point to the fact of how little we actually know, despite how much we say we know, Danny, with our experience in Afghanistan. The leader of the Taliban, Mullah Omar, who we swore up and down was in Quetta, Pakistan, and that he was nowhere in Afghanistan, had been in Afghanistan since late 2001. And then it turned out, no, actually, he was in Zabul province, and I was probably about 12 miles from him the whole time. You know, man. I mean, like, and we didn't even know the guy was dead for 2 years, right? I mean, like, right. So when you hear these triumphal explanations of how great the Western intelligence services are, how brilliant our people are, we got the best minds, the best technology, we know this, that, it's certain. Yeah, no, man, you got to have a grain of salt as big as your head when we start talking about these kinds of things. But no, it does appear that they got lucky today and they got Sinwar. And of course, from what we've seen in the media already is again, I'm stuck on this word triumphalism, as if that this is the victory, that it's all going to be better now, that as if Sinwar is some type of Batman villain and the crime ring is going to collapse now because they got the guy at the top of the organizational chart. And, you know, we all know that's not how it works. So
what do you think the reaction is going to be among either the Palestinians at large or whatever's left of the Hamas military wing? Will they quit fighting?
No, absolutely not. No, they'll mourn and they'll carry on their mission. They'll look to him and take what they've learned from him, the aspirational aspects of his leadership. They will honor him in the sense of he was our leader in his resistance. And I'm sure there's plenty of internal disagreement as to whether October 7th was a benefit to the Palestinian people, particularly the Palestinian people in Gaza, what with this genocide that was brought on top of them. But from Palestinians I've talked to as other allies, they, generally keep coming back to this point of it was just a matter of time. If it wasn't October 7th, it was going to be something else that would have led Israel down this path towards a genocide. So there's a fatalism that comes with it. And the idea being that Sinwar was our leader in this period, and now he'll be replaced by somebody else. But the idea that because Sinwar is dead, that the resistance is going to fold is ludicrous. I mean, the resistance exists because of the occupation, because of the apartheid, because of the blockade, because of the decades of the crimes against the Palestinians. And these are all very real, legitimate grievances. And because there's no political solution for them, then there's no accountability for what's occurred. Then, of course, the response will remain the same: violent opposition to occupation. And
well, that actually leads to the next question I was going to ask, because there are some that are already speculating that Netanyahu might possibly try and use this as a way to get some political cover, and saying, okay, we took out the ringleader. We had already taken out Ismail Haniyeh before that. So now we can actually have that ceasefire that the United States wants, so we'll negotiate an end to the conflict. But the question is, based on your conversations with any Palestinians, or just your experience, will the Palestinian people accept a ceasefire, or is that actually something that would be good for them? How do you see that?
This doesn't change anything for them in terms of what their ask is for a ceasefire, what their demand is for a ceasefire. This gives Netanyahu and his governing coalition political space. This allows them to say, look, we got the head of the snake. We achieved one of our objectives. Now, since we killed the man who is the leader of all this, we have killed the top villain. We can now negotiate with them, because in so many ways you see this done where a movement is personified, where an ideology is personified, as if it's just one singular person or a small group of people, and they make up the entire movement, right? You see this often when people talk about Russia, this idea that if we just got rid of Putin, Russia would be this, liberal democratic paradise, like just that type of like speculative fantasism, and so that's not what's going to happen here. But it does give Netanyahu the ability to use this as an achievement. It gives him some political space to maybe now reapproach negotiations, but he's still going to be as duplicitous and deceitful and dishonest as he was before. And there have not been negotiations, according to the Qataris. There's been no negotiations regarding ceasefires or a hostage exchange for almost a month now. So it does allow the Israelis to come back and say, okay, we're ready to negotiate again. But that doesn't change at all what the Palestinian position is going to be, nor will it change what the Israeli position is going to be. So this is just going to be a political stunt. It's going to be political theater. It's going to be used by Netanyahu to shore up his political capital in the same way that when Barack Obama in the United States killed Osama bin Laden, it was utilized in that way. We got our man. At the same time, the Afghan war went on for 10 more years. Syria and Libya have really just begun at that point. And Al-Qaeda and its successors, most specifically the Islamic State, hadn't even come close to reaching the heights of their power.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, so that's, all this has to be tempered with that. And I think most of us are that way, Danny. We understand this to be, you killed the top guy. Congratulations. It doesn't change anything.
Well, and that's actually kind of where I want to go with this segment here anyway. And can Israel kill its way to peace and prosperity and success? Or has it gotten into something that's only going to expand with time, and the cost could really build up here? Now, one of the things that has already been going on is that, of course, we just got through talking about the now ongoing war against Hamas in the Gaza Strip. You could probably also expand that into the West Bank, because that's one of the areas that's claimed by Israel in its 7-front war. They actually include that one in there. Mm-hmm. But here overnight, the United States used a B-2 bomber to attack into Yemen, which is just actually helping out the Israeli side, which is also bombing into Yemen. So that's also one of their fronts in the war. And as you and I have discussed several times on this show, even, this is really a perpetuation against Yemen that's been going on for 2015, I think. Saudi Arabia tried for a full decade of using all the technology and air power and missiles and everything else, and never brought them to their heels. And now, by the way, Gary, if you also have that screenshot up of the 700 and some odd weapons that have been used. Yeah, thank you. That one right there. This is what has not been very well talked about in the United States very much anymore. It's almost like in the background, but against the Houthis, we've been firing this was as of July, the middle of July, 700 weapons had been expended by the Eisenhower Carry Strike Group, who've now been replaced by the Lincoln, Abraham Lincoln Strike Group, and they're just continuing on. And we are just draining our missile inventories against something that's not going to have any impact at all. So this is also starting to cost us. But let's talk real briefly about the Yemen portion of this war. Is there a military solution for Israel?
With regards to Yemen, no, absolutely not. I mean, I don't see how they could achieve anything with regards to Yemen. Even if Israel, the United States were to concentrate their fires, right, to mass and to just bomb the heck out of the Yemenis, at best, what they're going to get is what the Emiratis and the Saudis got when they did that for 6 years. I mean, so no, there's no military solution to this. The solution to ending this conflict is to end the genocide in Gaza, and with the extension of that, which the end part of that, is that excuse me, there must be a political solution to the Palestinian issue. There must be a Palestinian state. That's the only way this thing ends. Otherwise, you're just going to have it's going to roll like a wave. There will be times when it will seem as a cool off, and they'll come back down, and then they'll heat back up again. And we'll see that for years. Essentially, there'll be a period of months or years with conflict, and then it'll cool off, but it'll all be there. They'll just basically be rearming and reorganizing and refitting, and then it'll happen again. Something will spark it, and it'll happen again. I mean, that's the what seems logical to me. That seems like what the pathway that we're all on here is. This idea that we're going to fly B-2s from, I don't know if they came out of Missouri, wherever they came out of, and that's somehow going to defeat the Yemenis, the Houthis. We've spoke about this before, Danny, right? The Saudis and the Emiratis waged genocide. They starved 400,000 Yemenis to death, trying to and they couldn't do it. I mean, so what do we think we're going to do with firing missiles off our ships, dropping bombs off our planes? And all we're going to do, as you pointed out, is just exhaust ourselves. I mean, that's 770 munitions. You're getting in the range of $1 billion at least, probably.
Oh, it's over $1 billion,
and on and on and on. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, okay, so that's you can, I think, make a pretty good argument that the Hamas fight in Gaza Strip and the Yemenis part, those are ongoing, that have no prospect for any kind of military success or end date at all in sight, nothing at all. So those are going to continue on. Next, we'll move to Lebanon. Now, Netanyahu has been kind of outspoken and reaching out to all the people that he's bombing to try to get them to see things his way. Here's what he said to the people of Lebanon.
This is a message to the people of Lebanon. Do you remember when your country was called the Pearl of the Middle East? I do. So what happened to Lebanon? A gang of tyrants and terrorists destroyed it. That's what happened. Lebanon was once known for its tolerance, for its beauty. Today, it's a place of chaos, a place of war. Israel withdrew from Lebanon 25 years ago, but the country that actually conquered Lebanon is not Israel, it's Iran. Iran, which finances and arms Hezbollah to serve Iran's interests at Lebanon's expense. Hezbollah has turned Lebanon into a stockpile of ammunition and weapons and a forward Iranian military base.
Okay, so first of all, just on the surface of it, how effective do you think that message to the people of Lebanon is going to be? Because what Netanyahu is trying to do is trying to reach into that, divide again, where they had a civil war for a long time, and the people in Lebanon who like Hezbollah and those who hate Hezbollah, and as well as the government. How effective do you think it can be?
Well, that's what he's trying to do. He's trying to open up those cracks again, right? He's trying to dial it up, crank it up, and ultimately that's what they would like to see, both the Israelis and the Americans, and some of the Europeans as well, is that Lebanon breaks out into a civil war essentially, and Hezbollah loses its power base because of other factions within Lebanon, and then this fantasy that somehow the Shia population, which is the predominant base of support for Hezbollah, will see the error of their ways and go along with the Christians or whoever. Absolute fantasy. That was a ahistorical euphemism that Netanyahu was shelling out. Certainly, the Lebanese people recognize that. He keeps doing these statements, right, Danny? And they're not geared towards the Lebanese. They're not geared towards the Palestinians or to the Iranians. They're geared towards the West. He's providing the talking points for American members of Congress, for American media. He's providing the justification. He's continuing the context at which the narrative is all built around. So if you were to watch, say, over the weekend or this coming weekend, any discussion on Meet the Press or any of those type of shows, those American political apologists, whether they be in the media or in the Congress supporting Israel, will all use, they'll use all the same type of talking points that Netanyahu is providing them. He's giving the Lebanese a way out. He's offering a hand of friendship. He's showing clearly that this is not about the Lebanese people. It's about this terrorist leadership. Just like in Gaza, if the people of Palestine would just rise up and throw off the shackles of Hamas, all this would be over with. This fabulous fantasy line. But this is what the narrative is based upon. And so when Netanyahu does these statements, he doesn't care about the Lebanese people. Maybe there is some type of Machiavellian attempt, like we were saying, to split or to drive wedges within the Lebanese people further, to replay the civil war, if you will, that the Americans and Israelis think they can exploit. But predominantly, it's meant to give members of Congress and members of the American media their talking points for how to describe what's occurring there.
Yeah, and we're going to see some more of that in just a few minutes here. But I want to stick with the topic of the fight in Lebanon for the moment, because this is now, if the Yemen situation is now just a festering thing, if the Hamas fight in the Gaza Strip and the West Bank against the Palestinians there is on fester mode, the situation in Lebanon is starting to heat up. This is there has been a media blackout from the Israeli side, so you don't expect anything to come from there. They've had a handful of reports about casualties, etc. But when you look at here, this is Middle East Eye, which is one of the better ones in the Middle East. It's in English. It kind of tells you what's really happening on the ground. And when you look in there about what's happened so far in the front, what we discover, and I'll just read this in case the letters are too small for people to read. It says, journalists covering the situation in southern Lebanon have told Middle East Eye that most Lebanese towns bordering Israel have fallen under effective Israeli control already. Most of the towns are less than 2 kilometers inside Lebanese territory, which leads this certain expert they had talked to, a guy named Krieg, to say the Israelis are being, quote, extremely slow in their advances. With some of the reports claim Israeli forces have reached further, they have not been able to stabilize their positions. They have not made the progress that I expected them to make in 16 days, which suggests that it is far more difficult. So there is certainly more fierce resistance than Israel initially expected. And one of the comments that's made in both this one and in some of the other places where I've seen is that unlike the 2006 war, where Israel was trying to make a fast penetration to go as far as they could and to accomplish a couple of specific tactical objectives, and then they only stayed 34 days before they withdrew. Here, they're trying to clear the place out. Right. But as you know from your direct experience fighting these kinds of insurgent forces, it's not just about the towns. There's some video out, and I'm not sure if that's the one that Gary's showing here, where Israel released, I think overnight, that they basically wiped a town, a little village, off the map, and an incredible display of firepower. Right. But most of these fighters aren't in the villages. They're in the sides of mountains. They're in tunnels. They're in caves that they've dug, etc. Israel has even shown where some of these are, they actually have a little pop-up cover like a spider hole, which you can come out. And those have to be methodically gone after one after the other. And if you keep going forward, then all of a sudden they're going to be in your rear and it's going to cause more problems. This seems like not just a fester mode, but this is something that can cause real casualties to the Israeli Defense Forces. I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I mean, they're certainly their pace and their tempo here, and it's not for lack of manpower and forces. They've mobilized, from what I understand, 4 divisions.
Yes.
They've got more forces on their border right now with Lebanon than they had in 1982 when they invaded and pushed all the way up to Beirut. So they've got the men and the material, the equipment to go in. It's just, I think, one, the resistance from the Lebanese, from Hezbollah, is incredibly tough. This is something that the Hezbollah has prepared for since 2006 again. But also, too, they are also up against a very motivated, inspired fighting force in Hezbollah, as well as a fighting force that has recent and quite important combat experience in Syria. So what they're going up against is really world class, if you want to describe it that way, in the sense of the light infantry that they're facing. They're also going into prepared defense. Again, Hezbollah's been expecting this. I think what the Israelis are doing, though, rather than making that lightning run up to Beirut like they did in 82, or like you were saying, up to the river, the Litani River in 06, this is a different approach. This is a different strategy with a different goal. And it's almost like a reverse scorched earth policy. Scorched earth is familiar to people in the sense as you're retreating, you destroy everything so that the enemy that captures it gains nothing from it. In this case, I think it's as the Israelis go forward, they are degrading and destroying everything that they touch, so that essentially they are forcing the population to leave. They are depopulating southern Lebanon, at least that area up to the Litani River. This will take months upon months of time. And the idea being is to get to the point that it is basically depopulated. People are unable to sustain themselves there. And this then gives the Israelis the ability to essentially declare the entire area a free fire zone. And then, of course, they just maintain a persistent surveillance over southern Lebanon, like they've done in Gaza, like they're increasingly doing in the West Bank, whereas, it becomes a kill anything that moves. And I think that's the way I'm looking at it, in the sense of where I can see them going. Certainly they're slow because Hezbollah is fighting the hell out of them. But I also think that they have an approach here. We're going to destroy and degrade everything we come across. We're going to make this place unlivable, and then we're going to turn it into a free fire zone.
Well, in fact, I saw a report from the Lebanese government. Some of their officials yesterday were reporting that the same tactics that were used in the Gaza Strip are being used here, in that there are schools, hospitals, anything that helps sustain life is being systematically bombed out with Israeli air power. So they do seem to be having this forward scorched earth policy, as you say, to try and I guess just eliminate it. But
they've already displaced 1.5 million people or so, 1.3 million, whatever. I don't even think really anyone knows.
That's a huge number.
Huge number. And the thing about people have to remember is that, unlike in Gaza, where people couldn't go anywhere, where the people were trapped in southern Lebanon, the people can get out. Even though the Israelis have bombed the roads, they've bombed bridges, they've bombed people trying to flee, there still is the opportunity people escape from the Israeli onslaught in a way that the Palestinians in Gaza never had the chance to.
But can this work? Can it work that you can literally wipe everybody out there and then be secure for Israel behind that border?
They are replicating the Romans, right? Tacitus, they've made a desolation and called it peace. The idea you destroy everything and then you call it peace. I think that is the aim point. That's the goal. And it fits. Eventually, maybe you can settle it. Maybe you can put your own people up in there. That's certainly the aspiration for many in the Israeli religious Zionist community. But even for the nationalists and the militarists within Israel, this idea of that buffer zone is something they've long wanted. So can they create the conditions that they make it uninhabitable? Again, they have the advantage of people being able to leave. In Gaza, they were not able to do that.
But see, here's the I guess the practical aspect of this. Let's say that Israel does succeed. Let's say that 9 months from now, they get up to whether it's the Litani or the Awali River, whichever they actually have set for the objective. And they actually have done that. They have destroyed everything out. And so now when there is this buffer, the Israeli people can move back into that 60, 70,000 people into the northern part that has been taken out. And they're going, yay, we succeeded. But now then, instead of the line being where it was, it's back here. But all of the people, that are north of that, unless they conquer the entire country,
Right.
there's going to be just a new line. And rockets can reach that distance.
Right.
So that's not going to eliminate the problem. It's just going to change it from one place to another.
Yeah, I hope no one misinterprets my attempt to explain this as my endorsement of it. It's certainly, for both moral and practical reasons, it's horrific. Yeah, I mean, then you have to garrison the place. You are now also creating a casus belli for a greater one. I mean, there is a reason for war, but certainly this idea to retake the land, and this is something that Hezbollah has done twice. Right, they kicked Israel out in 2000, and they repulsed them in 2006. So this is something that is imbued within the spirit of Hezbollah, within the spirit of Lebanese people, that we are the only ones to ever really defeat the Israelis and take our land back. Right, so now you've set in motion this storyline that the Lebanese have to fulfill of ridding you from their land. And to your point, Danny, it's on a practical level. Those rockets, I think it's from the border up to Litani is 18 miles or 18 kilometers. I always forget which, but it's not that far. The rockets range much farther than that. And so, as well as the thing, they're going to get longer range rockets. They'll get longer range drones. And we kept hearing these stories. I haven't seen them recently, but this idea that cadres of Syrians, Iraqis, and Yemenis were going to come in and fight alongside Hezbollah. Now you've really given that story some credence. Now you can really see why wouldn't that happen? The Afghans sent people to fight in Syria alongside of Hezbollah and the Syrian government. Why wouldn't that happen in southern Lebanon? So I think it presents well on paper. It meets the aspirational goals of both the militarists and the Zionists of a greater Israel. But when you start to kind of play it out and game it out, where does it take you to?
Well, and that's actually what I wanted to talk about, because I just used a figure of 9 months. So let's say it's 9 months from now and Israel will be somewhere, but how much farther they would go, who knows? Right. But so then at that moment, they're still going to have an active military front line somewhere up into Lebanon, however far they've gone. They're going to have the open wound in Yemen. That's going to continue to be hit with the Houthis in there. And there's going to still be a smoldering situation, probably at best, in the Gaza Strip, and certainly the West Bank is not going to be pacified. They've actually stepped up a lot of their operations in there. So now that you've got all those things fuming, and then the question is that I've got for you right now, and we won't take it to the Iran part yet. That's separate. Then what about their economy? I mean, there's 4 divisions in there. A lot of those have been mobilized.
Right.
They can't keep those guys up there forever, and they're going to continue to suffer potentially high casualties all the way through this. Can the Israeli population and economy suffer another 9 months of war like this?
I think the idea is that the Americans are behind us, and they're going to hook a hose up from their treasury into our economy, and they're going to keep us afloat. Just the way that the Americans kept the Afghan government afloat, just the way that they're keeping the Ukrainians afloat now, preventing the Ukrainian economic and governmental collapse because of all this infusion of cash from the Americans and from the EU. That's what's going to happen here. We've provided $23 billion to Israel this last year. We can provide double that. It might hurt the Ukrainians. We may not be giving them as much anymore, but Israel is going to get what they need. And I think that's the hope. Now, what does it look like? It looks terrible. I mean, you're going to have a depressed, to put it mildly, Israeli economy and society. The Israeli army is, I think, about 450,000 men and women. Only about 150,000 are active duty. The rest are reservists. And the Israeli population is about 8 million Israeli Jews. And so when you take out the kids, you take out those with disabilities, you take out the elderly, now you're down to what in terms of a working population? 3 million, 4 million people. And you've got 300,000 reservists. So 10% of your workforce is tied up with the military. I mean, then you counter all the other things, the the amount of money leaving the country, the amount of money that's not coming into the country, the tourists aren't showing up, your businesses are closing. I mean, so now you really are just on life support. You become just surviving on foreign assistance, on direct investment from the United States. And I think that's the plan, because they're not so concerned about that. What their concern is about fulfilling their historical obligation, whether it's in the modern era to fulfilling what was done before, or the biblical history about this, of fulfilling that. And we talked about this last week, right? With Naftali Bennett saying this is a once in a 50-year opportunity. We have to seize this. And that's what they're thinking. And they'll be Fortress Israel. I've seen other people refer to them as the Sparta of the West in the Middle East. And that's what they'll be. And they'll gladly take it on. They'll be subsidized by the Americans. It will be, again, the economy will not be the roaring technology accelerator that it has been in decades past in Israel. It will be politically more of a theocracy than it is now. In some ways, I think in 5-10 years from now, you can have Israeli leadership that resemble the Taliban, if you will. I mean, not identically, but in their sense where they don't care at all about the rest of the world. The Israelis don't care about the rest of the world right now. So as long as they get that support from the United States, to hell with everybody.
Well, and yeah, I mean, can we keep doing that? Is another problem. Do we have the capacity to keep doing that? And by the way, keeping this perpetual war going on in Russia, Ukraine, which is just eating up enormous resources. I don't think we have the capacity. You mentioned this the last time you were on the show, is that our annual production capacity of some of these key interceptor missiles is quite low, and some of them have been exhausted already. And now then I want to shift the conversation to the next part of this, which is the Iranian situation, because all those difficulties we just painted make this a very, very tenuous situation for Israel. But now then they're apparently on the cusp of expanding it further. So first of all, I want to take a look at Benjamin Netanyahu, taking a page out of his comments that he made to the people of Gaza, the people of Lebanon, and now the people of Iran.
I want to address you, the people of Iran. I want to do so directly, without filters, without middlemen. Every day, you see a regime that subjugates you make fiery speeches about defending Lebanon, defending Gaza. Yet every day, that regime plunges our region deeper into darkness and deeper into war. Every day, their puppets are eliminated. Ask Muhammad Def. Ask Nasrallah. There is nowhere in the Middle East Israel cannot reach. There's nowhere we will not go to protect our people and protect our country. With every passing moment, the regime is bringing you, the noble Persian people, closer to the abyss.
Yeah, but is it really their regime that's bringing them closer to the abyss? Because as we're going to see here in just a second, there's a lot of Israeli leaders that are talking pretty bold about what they're about to do militarily.
We will retaliate against Iran. We haven't forgotten what happened. We will decide about the timing, the location. I cannot disclose the details, but I can tell you one thing. It will be very painful for the Iranian regime, and they will think twice in the future whether to attack Israel or not.
So this is a lot bigger situation here, because unlike the Yemenis, the Hamas and the Hezbollah, those are all basically defensive battles that are going on there. And they try to launch some rockets here and there, but they're largely ineffective. Some of them have actually gotten through here of late, but it's a relatively small portion because they're just not the technological stuff. Iran, on the other hand, has a significant capacity, which they have demonstrated on a couple of occasions what it can do if the right thing is targeted in Israel. And the Iranians have been quite open and just about as emphatic that says, if we get hit with this painful and lethal strike that you had, that we are also going to hit back then, which will hurt physically Israel. What concerns do you have about where this war could go?
Oh, gosh. Yeah, I mean, the issue that it gets to the point where Iran is put in a position of use it or lose it. That's my biggest concern, where they have all these thousands of ballistic missiles, and they are faced with strikes against their leadership decapitation strikes as well as strikes on their on critical infrastructure, where they say, you know what, we're in a use it or lose it moment, where if we don't fire everything we have now, as well as strikes against their own, military bases, of course, and their forces, then we're not going to have an opportunity like this again. And they do, and they launch a salvo of 2,000 hypersonic ballistic missiles that kill untold scores of Israelis. And then, of course, the counter response to that, and you just have a horror of cities being destroyed. My fear on the Israeli side, the Israeli and American side, is that the Israelis use a nuclear weapon. That when you see someone like I've seen Danon in person, the man is unhinged. Like if you were in a coffee shop and he walked in, Danny, you would walk out of the coffee shop. Like this guy, he's deranged. He really is. And the idea that after a year of what we've witnessed in Gaza, how we've witnessed them handle Lebanon, the threats they've made, the history of Israel, the way it's used collective punishment and extreme terror to fulfill its goals, and the way, of course, it's.
I'm sorry. Hang on just a second, Gary. Is that live right there? And do we have sound?
Yeah, you want some sound on this?
Yeah.
Good.
Let's see what he's saying.
Mine and ours, and to the residents of Gaza, Sinwar ruined your lives. He told you he was a lion, but in reality, he hid in a dark tunnel, and he was killed when he ran away in fear from our soldiers. I want to repeat again, in the clearest manner, Hamas will no longer rule Gaza. This is the beginning of the day of after Hamas. It's opportunity for you, Gaza residents, to finally be freed of his tyranny. To the Hamas fighters, those who, I'm telling you all, whoever is holding our kidnap, whoever puts down his arms and allows our kidnap to come out, will live. However harms our kidnapped, he's a dead man. This will all bring about a closer time to the victory over Hamas. The darkness has been retreating and the light has been rising. Nasrallah, Sinwar, and others are no longer. I tell you, the residents of the area, there's an opportunity to create a new future of peace and prosperity for everyone. Together we can repulse the curse and bring the blessing. Now the world knows why we insisted on not ending the war and to get into Rafiah. This was the area where Hamas and many of the other archie-terrorists were hiding. I want to thank the IDF, the security forces, and there are no better ones than them. Again, we understand what happens to those who hurt us. We show the world how the good can win over the bad. The war is not over. It's a difficult war, and a heavy price and toll is exacted from us. My condolences to the families who have lost their dear ones. They're fighting in the last days as well, bring us closer to, as King David said, I will pursue my pursuers until they are all destroyed. We are in a war of an independence. We have to be unified, to be brave, to be strong, and we fight together, and with the help of the Almighty, we will win.
Okay, let's get a break away from that.
Right, and there's,
so what really
Netanyahu
stood up to me about
reacted to
that
the
one
death
is
of-
just toward the end, where he said the war's not over, and like King David, I will continue on until all my adversaries are destroyed.
Right.
So what does that mean for the Gaza Strip?
It really, Daddy, means that there's no hope for the Palestinian people. The best case would happen is that in an Israeli election, you get a change of leadership, a Yair Lapid or a Benny Gantz or somebody who would take power. And we're looking at that not happening for a year. And of course, the polls right now show that Netanyahu's governing coalition would win if the elections were held now. So there's not even much of a chance of it anyway, it seems like. But a year's a long time. But that's exactly it, a year. The genocide in Gaza will end when the Israelis feel that it's time to end it. And they don't even really have a goal. They just keep on killing for the sake of killing. They've got this genocide within a genocide is being called the Surrender or Starve campaign that they've launched in the north, where it seems like they are trying to ethnically cleanse the north of Gaza, push everyone south of the Netzarim corridor. But it doesn't even seem like there's really any plan for what to do, though. It seems that this has come up in the last couple months and they're going forward with it, but I don't know how much of a firm commitment there is to that, or if they're just going to push people back north after it's done. We just don't know. The speculation is they'll put settlers in. We don't know. But we do know that it's not going to end until the Israelis desire it to end. And when will that desire be met? The political benefits for keeping this thing going, the number of speeches, the more speeches that Netanyahu can make like that triumphant, victorious, as well as righteous speech, the more he keeps getting those as long as Gaza stays open, right? I mean, as long as the war stays open. So, and there's been no attempts at getting the hostages out. As I said earlier, the Qataris have said there hasn't been any talks in 3 or 4 weeks. So, you look at like their objectives for the Israeli objectives for the Gaza war, for their war in Gaza, for their genocide. And, their stated objectives, and one is to kill the leadership, to destroy Hamas. And you can kind of say, yeah, when we kill Mohammed Deif, when we kill Yahya Sinwar, when we kill Hezbollah, yeah, we're destroying Hamas. But we all know that's not true, right? So that you say they're killing them, but they keep, but with the hostages as a metric, are we going to get the hostages home? That's a real metric. Either the hostages are in Gaza or they're back home. And as long as they're in Gaza, this war keeps going on. I mean, they could claim right now, the war is over. We won. We killed Yahya Sinwar. We killed the architect of October 7th. We're done. We're pulling back. We've taught the Palestinian people their lesson. We've destroyed and degraded Hamas. We've killed 12,000 of their fighters, on and on and on. They could make all that stuff up if they want to and use that as excuse. With the hostages, they can't. As long as the hostages are still in Gaza, this thing goes on. And from what we can see, what we've seen this past year, the Israeli government really has no interest in getting the hostages back. So this war continues until it reaches some goal, some objective of this Israeli government, which is hard to tell because it seems as if the objective, the goal is the genocide itself, is the ethnic cleansing, the collective punishment itself. That's the goal.
And yeah, and you say it'll go on until Israel says it's not. Well, there's another thing that it will only go on as long as we facilitate it, as long as we provide the capability. Gary just showed that headline there a second ago that a so-called leaked note from the United States that said, hey, if you don't start getting aid into Gaza, we're going to continue to hold back some weapons sales. Now, I'm going to show you one of the reactions that from the United States side, people pushing back against the administration who's saying that kind of thing, which is a pretty tepid statement anyway. That you're
and you know what, Danny, from my understanding, with that letter, it doesn't even say like we're going to hold back weapons. It says there will be there may be consequences. So the administration hasn't really even said that. They've said there may be consequences after 30 days, which, as everyone knows, that gives you, you've got a barn door to walk through in terms of a loophole there. Yeah.
Okay. Well, with that barn door, though, there's some that don't even like that kind of thing. Watch this rather Orwellian description of the way things are from former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo.
It's absolutely a threat. It's a threat not only to the Israelis, it's a threat to American security. It fundamentally misunderstands the problem set here. The Israelis have been the ones providing assistance into Gaza for years. Along with the UN and the United States, they're the ones that have tried to make the lives better for the people in Gaza. It is Hamas who put civilians next to military targets and then killed 1,200 people and frankly, still holding Americans hostage. And the administration doesn't even talk about that in their letter. They refuse to accept the proposition that Tehran is the problem here, the Ayatollah and the IRGC, and they continue to restrain our ally from doing the necessary to protect itself and to protect us here in the United States and to threaten them, to say, if you don't provide more trucks of food, you'll remember the famous pier they built to try and deliver food that was just an epic failure at a couple $100 million of U.S. taxpayer expense. If you don't provide more food, we're going to demand that your nation be put at risk. That fundamentally mistakes good for evil.
Good for evil. So that's all you need to know, that Israel's good and everything they do is good and everything the other side done is evil, and it's all their fault and there's no reason for them to do anything. And by the way, American national security is at risk here. Wow, how do you unpack that?
Yeah, it is. He's likely to be in Trump's cabinet again, and this type of mindset, that type of worldview. And when you have someone like that, who's a director of CIA or the head of the State Department, you can't go into the meeting room with anything that contradicts or is counterfactual to his worldview, and everything that's presented to him, agrees with it. And it's not so much the fact that you're just giving the stuff that you agree with. It's that everyone down below him, that's all they're allowed to look at, all they're allowed to touch, all they're allowed to believe. And so you have this policy, you have American foreign policy predicated on these insane narratives, these fantastic, fabulous narratives of good versus evil. I wish this was some type of film or television series where Prince Pompeo would have to face his fate on the actual battlefield. Have to ride his horse out there and face down this enemy, and then of course take a lance through the heart or something like that. But that's not the way this is. These people also then suffer or are in a bubble, and not only are in a bubble that's immune from the reality of the world, they're also largely in a bubble that's immune from the consequences of the real world.
Yeah, and the consequences are just catastrophic for people in the region. But I think when you add a potential war in Iran, which according to the Israelis, they're going to do some kind of a big strike, and as you said a second ago, Iran is certainly going to have some sort of counterstrike that could be also lethal, which they have not done up to this point. But you look all this together, and you just see there is no achievable military aim for any of these, even if they wanted to. I just don't think that the world is going to continue to stand by if Israel moves into a physical ethnic cleansing or genocide where it's not 40, 50,000 or even 100, 200,000, but like 5, 6, 700,000, or they physically shove them off the land or something. It's hard for me to see that. I think there is some kind of limit to what's going on here.
I don't see that. I don't see that with this administration or with any other successor administrations. I think the political support for Israel in the United States is resolute. It's clear. It's defined. The Israel lobby made its point this election cycle in terms of how it can punish. It could punish and get rid of any dissent, and the rest of the world can go to hell. I think is what they're thinking. That no one's going to go up against the U.S. on this. That even if nations do start sanctioning and blockading Israel, similar to what we saw, say, with South Africa, it's going to take a long time. So I think in the next year, 2, 3, 4 years, Israel's going to do what Israel wants to do. They'll face consequences, of course. Their economy will continue to bleed out. They'll become more of a petty, backwards, theocratic state that has no real future other than just being on life support from the United States and enjoying the fruits of its defeat of the Palestinian people and the establishment of Greater Israel. But I think that's what they go for. I don't think in the next years you see anyone able to do anything about that. However, things are changing, and 5, 10 years from now, that's different.
But Matt, even that picture you're painting there, it's bad for Israel. There's no happy future out there. There's no secure future out there, and that even assumes that we will be able to continue to provide all these things, that this doesn't spark into a wider war, and that we can't even provide that backstop. Every way you want to look, this course of action is a dead end and a potential catastrophic for the Israeli state. That's why I'm so against this.
Right. In terms of financial, we can continue to support them, and we will. We spent
assuming that our ability to do that is this, and I don't want to even take that for granted. Honestly.
Well, yeah, sure. I mean, if you want to get into the larger picture of the solvency of the American government, yeah. But all that aside, how much did we spend on Iraq? How much did we spend on Afghanistan? Again, we just spent not even $25 billion in Israel. We could double that, and it's not much of an issue for us. We provided 185 billion to Ukraine in 2.5 years.
Good point.
So
Good point.
and the political support for Israel is it's ironclad, as they like to say. Now, how many SM-2 interceptors and THAAD interceptors and Patriot interceptors can we build? Yeah, not enough. But I think this is where you get to the thing I started to talk about earlier, the threat of the nuclear attack on Iran. I think that when you hear these guys Anon say that, when you look at how Israel has behaved the last year, how they behaved their whole history, the fact that they have these nuclear weapons that they would have, this might cause European nations to start to blockade them and to cut them off. They don't care because the Americans will stand behind them. I mean, I think I made this joke another time with you, but Israel drops a nuclear bomb on Iran, and the U.S. Congress is going to write a resolution praising it, celebrating it. So I think they're banking upon that, and their vision is also too very cosmic, very religious. They see a destiny in all of this. We can't discount the fact that I think it can kind of go either way on what does Netanyahu actually believe. But for many of those others in his government, for many of others, the supporters of the right wing, certainly the settler class, they really do believe this. They really do believe that they are enacting out God's will, that they're carrying out, they are in the final stages or whatever, the latest stages of a 3,000-year arc of history. They really do believe that. And so all this, doesn't it make sense then that Israel would be isolated against the world if they have to fulfill that history? Doesn't that make sense? It matches up to what happened then. Right. I mean, people really do believe that. And again, I'm trying to explain it makes sense of what they're doing. And by no means, as you know, I'm not endorsing it. I think it's just as crazy as you are. And I see like this is just the doom that comes out of this, particularly for the Palestinian people, because there's no way I could see this thing. There's no good end for the Palestinian people other than a return to October 6th, right? Other than a return to the occupation and apartheid in the next couple of years, maybe farther out than that, things have changed, but in the next couple of years.
We'll see how that works out there. We're going to stay on top of this. I'm sorry I'm going to have to break contact here real quick. I've got to go on another TV station here at the moment, but we're going to stay on top of this. Thank you so much for coming on today. And believe me, as the news continues to break, we'll stay with it. So thank you very much, Matt. And thank you very much to you guys. We will see you on the next episode of Daniel Davis Deep Dive.
Thanks, Danny.